Hello, everyone. I couldn't be more pleased with today's guest poet and founder of the Adroit Journal, Peter LaBerge. He founded the journal in 2010, and since they have published some of my favorite poets in 37 issues selected from almost 100,000 submissions. And they do some incredible work in the literary community, including the annual Adroit Prizes for Poetry and Prose for secondary and undergraduate writers, the annual Janickian Scholars Program for emerging students and non-student writers, and the free Adroit Journal Summer Mentorship Program for high school students from around the world. Peter has been recognized from TED to Teen Vogue for his work as a writer and publisher. He is the recipient of a 2020 Pushcart Prize, and his work has appeared in Best New Poets, Crazy Horse, Harvard Review, Pleiades, and Tin House, among others. He is also the recipient of a fellowship from Bucknell University Stadler Center for Poetry. So welcome, Peter, and thanks for taking time to chat with me for the Telltale Poetry Submission Interview Series.
Thank you so much for having me, Trish. I'm really excited to be here.
Yes, thank you. It's really, truly a pleasure to speak with you one-on-one. We've, interacted online quite a bit. So really, yes, very great to be here with you. So with all this, with the accolades and success that I just read, my first question is really, what has surprised you most about the success of Adroit?
Honestly, I would say that it has been successful. I mean, I started it when I was 15 and I was so sure, or rather, I guess I was so doubtful that it would take off that I didn't even tell anybody in my life about it. Like I didn't tell my English teachers, I didn't tell my parents, I didn't tell any of my other family, I didn't tell most of my friends. I started it and brought on 2 friends pretty quickly, but other than that, it was basically the 3 of us for the entire first year. And it was very much sort of just this impulsive idea to found a sort of bridge between the world of student writing and the world of professional adult writing, because I was looking for that, and that it didn't exist. And so, when you encounter something that you want that doesn't exist, generally, most of the time, I would say it doesn't exist for a reason. And so I really had no idea both what I was doing and what I was getting myself into with starting a publication. Because I had like 3 or 4 months of writing experience and no marketing experience, no management experience, I was 15. Like I had no professional experience to speak of, really. And so just the fact that, people really took to the idea and helped to elevate it and told their friends about it and, supported the first couple of issues and contributed to the first couple of issues. There have been, a number of fantastic mentors that I've had outside of the classroom, and just friends that I've had who have been really wonderful supporters of the journal since like issue 1. And when they contributed, I wouldn't even think that somebody at that caliber of career would be even aware of it, let alone, receptive to like a 15-year-old's email. And at the time, I think there literally wasn't a website for the journal. So, some of these people, the ones that come to mind most immediately are Dorian Locks and Laura Kosicki, who both contributed to the first issue. The fact that they would trust their poems with somebody, with a 15-year-old with no website or writing experience, it was really inspiring to just keep going. And so now, everything, of course, there have been many, many, many surprises over the last, 10 and a half years. But I think that's like the biggest one. That's the one kind of that keeps giving in that it's part of every subsequent surprise, I think.
That's so great to hear, because I think building community around any project like that you start is so important. And when it happens, especially organically, I had a very similar experience with my website when I started posting information to share on my blog. It was really about, this is the stuff I'm looking for. These are the things I want to keep track of. So I'm going to post them on here, and well, maybe I'll share a few on social media. And then people just started coming, and it really started building kind of this community, which was completely unexpected. And I've just like what you were saying, I had professional experience in a completely different industry, right? So software is nothing like the literary community.
Oh yeah.
So I did have that to fall back on, but I didn't know any of those things either, how to market or how to network and how to really build that community. It was something that I learned, and I'm still learning and still getting so much from, like you said, the surprises that come,
Right.
pretty continuously. So that's really awesome. I'm going to put you on the spot just a little bit.
You're fine.
Surprise question.
Yeah.
When did you get that feeling that what you were doing was important? How far in?
Well, I would say, I found it to be important as soon as it was having an impact on my, like, on other areas of my life. Suddenly my friends were all the people that were, I had friends in real life too, but like my friends started to be, my closest friends started to be my friends that I was working on the journal with. And, they were from all over the place because of course the staff is remote and from around the world. And so, there were times when I was lucky enough, somebody would be traveling through, or we would be meeting at a camp or something like that, where I would meet people that I'd talked to. And of course, this experience, I'm sure.
Sure. Yes.
And most writers do, because AWP exists, but AWP doesn't exist in high school. And so when you have that kind of experience where you're like, oh my gosh, I've read your work and I love your work, and you've read my work and we know each other's work, and maybe like you've been on the staff with me, or you've just been like another person in the community. And so, when you have that kind of experience, it really reinforces, I think it really reinforced specifically Adroit's mission, which is to bring these writers together, who many of whom are the only poets that they know, at the age of 14 or 15 or 16. And so to give them the permission that frankly they already have, but maybe don't know that they have, to take themselves a little seriously and, at least see what's out there. Honestly, that was part of, not to get off on a tangent, but that was part of the whole reason why I was so passionate about the journal in the first place, was this idea of visibility of the literary world. I think the literary world, and I know one of your questions later is how would you change it? But to give a little spoiler, one thing that I found challenging about the literary world at the beginning was the fact that it is very insular. Once you're in, it's very expansive, but it's difficult to find your footing as you're trying to get into it. It's very intimidating from the outside. I remember that. And so I found myself thinking, we have so many resources connecting people with mentors, like older mentors in STEM areas, and, in even other humanities areas, but we really don't have that, or we didn't have that with the literary world. And I just found that to be so strange and like such a missed opportunity. And so, that's why I founded the mentorship program. And I think to this day, the mentorship program is, at least for the students that were able to accept into it, the most impactful arm of the journal, maybe. But anyways, so
that's great.
That's a big part of the whole journal's mission, I would say.
I love that, the parallel that you mentioned, like comparing the literary community and that whole world to STEM. I think that's a really great comparison, and something we need to do more often, really. because we should be emulating some of the great work that they're doing, which you've certainly taken on quite a bit of that. And I will tell you that if I had come across something like Adroit when I was in high school, it probably would have completely changed the trajectory of my life, because I was writing like mad, but all I had for resources was, what I could find at the library. And there really wasn't, this of course was in the 80s. So things were even, more separated, but something like that would have definitely, I can see that's got to make a huge impact for those kids.
Totally.
So it's a really wonderful project, and I'm just thrilled to see that it exists. And to talk to you about it. And, we can be fluid here. So we started dabbling into it. So yes, let's just talk about we're talking about things that, maybe we missed or that we created that are, now starting to form these broader communities and start making those connections more accessible. So what else, would you like to see more of?
Well, I think what I was speaking about is something that, there is no maximum when it comes to mentorship and outreach and support. And so of course that would be wonderful to see, particularly for marginalized writers. And I think that should apply to marginalized writers who know that they want to be writers, who are, further along. Maybe they're in college and they're like creative writing majors or English majors, or maybe they're in grad school, maybe they're just trying to navigate and get those first couple of publications. That's a stage of mentorship. But also, like I was saying, there's the high school stage of mentorship, there's the middle school stage of mentorship. These are all stages, and it can be, the further along you get, the more difficult it is for somebody to do like a hard right turn and pivot into something. Unless, every writer is different. So I don't want to generalize anything, right? Because I know a couple of writers that have taken that hard right turn, even maybe after a whole career in something, and decided to pursue poetry after that. And so that's an entirely different situation. But, the further along you get, the more daunting something like creating art can be, I think. I think it's very, it lends itself well to the sort of ethos of childhood and just sort of doing what you want to do and doing it the way you want to do it. That's very much, I think,
feeling like there's a set timeline, right? Like you can never catch up if you start too late.
Exactly.
Which is a really unfortunate perspective. I can say that from experience.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love what you're saying there.
That's definitely something else that needs to be talked about more. I think, and I think it's unfortunate that I think it's especially attached to age. There is a fair amount of that with stage. So, you're in, I don't know, Best New Poets. Now it's time to go publish a book or something like that. Or you're MFA. Now it's time to go, get that thesis as a finalist somewhere, or, to bridesmaid it around all the different presses. That's something. And that's, that can put pressure and be problematic for writers. But what I'm seeing more and more and more and more of is 16-year-olds saying, well, okay, Ocean Vuong won a pushcart when he was 22, and so therefore I have to win a pushcart by the time I'm 22. And no, no, you don't. But there's like visibility. The writers that have really high visibility are, of course, the ones that are accomplishing incredible things and like breaking these quote unquote records. And you have it all the way down to, there have been high school students who get into Best New Poets, or they get into the Best of the Net, and suddenly like that's an expectation that every writer now has, and that's not something that just happens. Like it happens.
You can't force it. In some cases, if you're really prolific, maybe that is something that might come, and I shouldn't say come easier, but everybody has, different pace. And that was something I
Right.
kind of learned the hard way, where I found that I had to give myself permission. I hosted a poetry reading series in Utah for several months. And one of our feature readers, Kimberly Johnson, who teaches at BYU, she teaches poetry there. She's amazing.
Mhm.
But she stood up and talked about how she was such a slow writer and she hasn't had a book out for like 10 years or something. And a light just went off above my head and I went, yes, I can go at whatever
Yeah.
pace suits me best and fits my work and gives me that room to work on craft or to
Yeah.
nurture another community or to read for Adroit or to, these other things that really, they feed into the creative aspects. Like you have to
Definitely.
feed yourself from different angles. So
Absolutely. I've had the same experience, honestly, because I put a ton of pressure on myself when I was in high school and college. And when I was in college, I was publishing like all over the place. In fact, I still use in my bio a couple of places that are from college. So like I pushed myself hard, and I just pushed myself harder and harder and harder, because once you have that magic momentum, that
right,
writers that we talked about have, you're like, oh my gosh, well, I can't lose it. I have to use
right,
it. I have to build
right.
it. And, this is my shot or whatever. And so it's really difficult to keep writing and to write in a healthy manner when you
Yes,
have that kind of pressure mounting. And it may not even be external pressure, right? It may not even be
sure.
being like, where's the collection? But it's in your own mind. You're like, okay, I just like, I have these things that have gone well, so I need to keep building
Got
on
to
that.
keep
So
going. Yes, that was exactly what I was up against with it. I just really felt that
dangerous
way. And
mindset. Ah,
when I let that go, it was the best gift I could have given to
yeah.
myself. And I just have been, now I get more of those surprises that you were talking about, right? So
Right.
things come more organically. And when they come, you go, oh, that good thing happened,
I know.
and it
Yeah.
wasn't a forced thing. So
It's no longer, I see this a lot with emerging writers now, where it's relief if something, like if they get into something or if they get some award, it's relief. And I'm like, that's not the emotion.
right,
That's not the
right.
emotion we should be feeling
Sure.
when something highly subjective happens to work out in your favor. Like, it's not relief. It should be joy. But I mean, I found myself feeling the same, right? Like, it's I don't know. There though, I definitely have shifted heavily from that mindset in college, where I graduated from college in 2017, and I went out to work in tech in San Francisco, which was quite a turn from
Mhm.
my creative writing major life. But I got out there and just didn't write for 2 whole years, basically.
Right,
And
right,
it was highly disconcerting because I had no plans to not write. But suddenly I just like had no ability to, I just had no accessibility to the mindset that I
right.
needed to write. And I remember also at that time, I'd just come out with a whole project, like a chapbook. And I was not even sure what I wanted to write next. Like I didn't have any
Right.
idea of what was going to come next. And so those two things put together, I just didn't write forever. And it sort of broke this whole spell of like, oh, I'm going to build on it. I'm going to build on it. What else can I do? What else
Right.
can I accomplish?
Right.
Just sort of was like, it gave me permission to not care about any of it, which
Yes.
on the one hand it was sort of scary because it was kind of a free fall. You're like, am I ever going to go back to this thing that has meant so much to me? But on the other hand, it's, you can sort of write and engage with it on your own terms, which has been
Exactly.
lovely. And now, I'm in my MFA and I have sort of these cycles where, I'll be a little bit more productive and then I won't be productive for like 3 whole months, which when you're in an MFA program and trying to write weekly is maybe a little bit of a problem. But, um, I've found, I think, um, a cadence that feels like I'm not forcing anything. And honestly, I watch, I watch a ton of deadlines just go by, and I like forget to submit at this point. I'm like, well, that's progress, I guess, kind of like
That
in one
took me
way, it's
some
like,
getting
okay, my
used
career
to.
is not happy about that. But like on the other hand, I'm not basing my self-worth as a writer on any of that anymore. And that
Yes.
was a super hard mindset to break. But once you do, it's a whole different experience of writing and sharing what you've written, I would say.
Well, and I mean, I completely agree. And I used to watch deadlines like crazy and put them on my calendar and all this stuff. And I
Yeah.
totally don't do that anymore.
I've done the same.
There are always opportunities. There are always opportunities. There are always things that you can do later. So I think that's really important. And that kind of permission is super important. And since you brought up submitting, I'm going to pivot just a little bit to just, to mention that Adroit is currently open for submissions. And I'm going to combine a couple of questions here and just let you speak to this a little bit. But
Sure.
so they're currently open for poetry, fiction, nonfiction, and art. And because, I mean, we talked about like almost 100,000 submissions at this point since you started really working with Adroit. So I'd like for you to talk a little bit about, how do you manage that many submissions? What is your selection process like? You said a word subjectivity earlier, which I think is, something that everyone needs to consider as they're submitting. And then also, as you kind of explain that to us, then just kind of finish up with like some of the things that you really wish you were seeing come in. So if you could comment on just that, all of those things, that would be great.
Definitely. Yeah. So to kick things off, I definitely have, I mean, the sort of role of the staff reader has evolved tremendously over the years because, obviously almost 100,000 submissions, which is wild to even think about, but that has not come in a linear way, right? So we've gotten way more submissions in the last 5 years than we did in our first 5. And so in our first 5, it was like, whoa, people are starting to take notice, but it was much more manageable. Whereas now, we have a gigantic staff. And we were talking about this earlier, but, it's just really this awesome sort of, it's a community where everybody has other things going on, right? Because it's a volunteer role, at least for now. And so everybody's got other things that they're doing, but everybody is united by this like passion for Adroit as well as for, elevating exciting new poetry or exciting new fiction or nonfiction or art or whatever genre they may be happening to read. So, that is such a wonderful component, I think, of my daily life over the last 10 and a half years that you don't necessarily notice it. And by you, I mean, I guess I don't really notice it peeking into my life every day, but it does, every single day there's been some sort of thing from Adroit. I don't think I took a trip internationally for like 2 weeks in 2013 and I was off because there was no internet. I was in China, so there was no internet. But other than that, I've been online in some way, shape, or form and engaging with the journal in some way, shape, or form every single day for the last 10 and a half years. And so that has been, at this point, it's like growing, right? You don't notice it day to day, but you suddenly just look back and you're like, oh, I have facial hair now. Or like, my voice has dropped. Or like, oh, I, just graduated from college. I can't believe that because I remember being 5. It's the same sort of thing with watching the journal develop. And I think that's like perhaps an expected metaphor, Adroit being a child, but I think that's really apt because when something goes wrong, it's like, okay, well, throwing out whatever I was doing today, like I have to go, firefight, or I have to go talk to people, or I have to go, sort out this issue, or I have to go find a stand-in or whatever, whatever fire may be happening. That's very much sort of the way and the priority that one must have to work on it. But anyways, your question of what the selection process is like, you're right to call out subjectivity, because of course it's subjective. We get so many submissions, we have so many different readers. Every single submission that Adroit receives, whether it's for a contest or for regular submission, has at least 3 voices on it before any decision is rendered. So a lot of times, particularly if it's like stalemate, and I've seen a couple stalemates, maybe you have too, where people are like passionate. Like there are people that
Yes.
are never, and then there are people that are like, I'll quit if this doesn't get accepted. So it's like people get in, discussion. And so those pieces get the most voices out of all of them. But everything gets at least 3. And so of course we have more than 3 readers, obviously, many, many more than that. And so every time it gets like a different reception. And it's interesting to see the way that like, or not necessarily to see it, but just to think about the way that that affects the overall issue, right? Because maybe if somebody else had seen this first piece, or they'd seen this piece first, brain, they would have upvoted it, which would have signaled it to other readers. Like maybe they left a really enthusiastic comment, and maybe that piece would have landed in discussion with the editors, and who knows what would have happened from there. So that is something I think about when I try to get into the submittable and get through as much as I can personally, as well as obviously encouraging our editors to get through reading as much as they can, to identify things that maybe they think that we should be talking about. And that has happened a couple of times where, our readers have been like, not sure, not for me. And then somebody or I will come in and be like, what, this is genius. And so, we'll end up taking something from it, or vice versa, where we won't see the magic in something, but a reader will come along and say, nope, this is amazing, and here's why. And we'll be like, oh. And so, that's the value of having a diverse staff, aesthetically and otherwise. And that's one of my favorite things to see happen in the journal. Unanimity is wonderful, right? Like when everybody's like, I'm obsessed. But that's not the reality in most cases, as I'm sure anybody who's ever read for any journal knows. Like there's always, 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 for the most part, diversity in opinion. And so
yes, that's true.
So, and if there's not, maybe you need to reevaluate the way that you're picking staff members. But anyway, so that's a little bit about, I guess, in terms of like the hard and fast process of the journey a submission takes, the journey a successful submission takes. So it's open for all of our readers to read, and then I'll go through, or a member of our editors team will go through and amass like all of the submissions that are getting some sort of positive attention. And we'll make like a big spreadsheet. I'm a sucker for a colorful, organized spreadsheet. So I generally hop in and do my thing and organize it for everybody. And every editor has a column, and it's a whole thing, where we all go through and we read and we log our votes. And then we all have these editorial calls every month or so, maybe every other month in off seasons. And we just work through, we just talk about poems that, and of course prose is the same thing, but I'm more on the poetry side. So that on that. But yeah, that's the way that things work. And so we have, these editorial calls where we'll talk about pieces that individually maybe struck us, or, that the whole group admired, or that the whole group wasn't feeling. And so from there, we obviously make our decisions, and then, we put together the issue and decide which issue it should go in, and so on and so forth. But yeah, that's the path that things take. And one other thing that I was just going to say, which is just funny, is that we rejected a piece by a writer. This was like maybe, I don't know, 3 years ago, 4 years ago. Actually, I have 2 different anecdotes. So this piece 3 or 4 years ago is a poem, and we rejected it. I believe we close called it or something. And then the writer accidentally resubmitted it, same version, everything. And he withdrew it and he was like, oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed. Like, I can't believe I resent this piece that like I'd already sent. And we were about to accept it. So like, it was
Oh,
this really
goodness.
funny email that was like, yeah, that was our bad. Because we actually love this piece. And so, you know, it just got 3 readers the first time, and then it got 3 different readers the second time. And it went from 3 no's to 3 yeses and landed on our plate, and there it went. But the other funny thing I was going to say, or it's not even funny so much as it's just reality, is that, you know, we've rejected pieces that have won push cards and they've landed in Poetry or the New Yorker or the Atlantic or the New York Times Magazine or whatever they call it. All of these, you know, and more, of course. Poems and stories that we've rejected have landed everywhere, right? And so,
Sure.
and of course, poems and stories that other people have rejected have landed here. So it really comes down to that subjectivity thing. And I know one thing, I don't even remember, I don't even remember what it was you said, but it made me think of this idea of, oh, I remember. You were saying something about, you know, whether or not being at that momentum makes it like easier to achieve. And I think it really boils down to, regardless of your momentum or regardless of what stage you're at, it comes down to how many opportunities you're going for, which
Sure.
of course there's this whole discussion about, you know, financial security and being able to submit to things that have submission fees versus being not able to do that. But, you know, going for every single opportunity that you can go for, that you're eligible for, that you can afford, that is really that's what you can do to help your career today, right?
Absolutely.
As opposed to what I'm doing, which is just letting submissions go by, or letting submission deadlines go by. But
They'll
that's
be there
really,
later, Peter, I promise.
I know they're coming back. They'll reopen. It'll be fine. Plus, I don't have enough work right now, so I need to I need to focus on that right now.
That's what I'm doing as well. I completely appreciate
right.
that. But you know, even if you know, even if you don't feel like you're really 100% ready, still taking advantage of those opportunities, it complements everything that you're doing, because it pushes you to write more. It pushes you to write a little bit better. You get some sort of response, which, you know, sometimes it can just be that one little personal rejection that makes you go, oh, I'm going to work on that a little bit more and send it out like 20 more places. Or that's an exaggeration. Maybe don't do that, because that's a lot of withdrawals when it does get accepted. But maybe a handful. But it is somewhat of a numbers game, right? And you know, give yourself better odds. And certainly there are plenty of no-fee opportunities that come up all the time. And there are a lot of places to go find those. TrishHopkinson.com is one. But yeah, obviously there are a ton of opportunities. So I really appreciate you, you know, circling the conversation back to that.
Yeah. And one more thing I'll say, sorry, I know I'm talking like for hours.
No, but, this is an excellent conversation. Loving it.
One more thing I'll say is that I have experienced as an editor and also as a submitting poet, the power of sending work that doesn't get accepted, both in what you're saying, right? Like I've had a poem, I think I submitted it like 34 places over the course of like 3 or 4 years, and it finally got taken.
That happened to me too. So, I have one that was 32, I think, really close to that. Finally got picked up, and I loved the poem, and I just was like, nope, it's going to get somewhere.
Exactly. It's like, if you believe in your work, then I really feel it's inevitable that it will land somewhere. It's just about finding the right home, finding the right pair of editors that see what you see in it, and you know, it's everybody else's loss. And so thinking about it that way, I mean, it can breed like bitterness. So, but also like it preserves your belief in your work, which I think is more important than any publication, obviously, not to get all like, pushy, but that's the first thing. And the other thing I would say is I've seen, you know, I've submitted something and the editors have been like, no, sorry, but like, we really enjoyed this. And so like,
Yes.
just send it to me personally next time, or, you know, mention me in your cover letter, because I want to read it next time. Or they're just like, send again, more generally. And I have definitely forged friendships with editors that have resulted from that kind of exchange. And obviously, you know, going up to those sorts of people at AWP, if you're able to, that can be really meaningful as well. I've definitely been in that situation as an editor, especially where somebody I've close called like 7 times comes up to me at AWP and I'm like, oh my gosh, I love your work. Like, do you have a submission with us? Or like, send to us right after AWP and I'll go take a look. And, you know, that's just kind of the way that, that the road to publication sometimes happens. You
Right.
just, names are recognized and submittable, for better or worse. And, you know, I definitely recognize people that I've close called a number of times. And
Yeah.
people think like maybe I don't. I totally do. And I seek out those submissions. So maybe that's just me.
No, that's really great insight. And I think it's everything that we've talked about. I think it's really important. I think there are questions that all writers and poets have at all different stages of their career, and the imposter syndrome is real for everybody. You know, it ebbs and flows. So I think this was all super valuable. I do have a couple more questions for you.
Yes.
One is, I was reading that you are starting an online creative writing college counseling company called Ellipsis Writing. So I want to know what you're up to with that. Like, what are you, you know, we talked about what we want to see more of in the literary community. So I kind of know, I want to know what you're trying to accomplish with that to maybe fill another one of those gaps.
Sure. Yeah. So the idea for Ellipsis came to me when it came to me in stages. At the beginning, I was just working personally with a couple of students who emailed me and just wanted to work with me. And they maybe didn't get into our mentorship program, or they missed the deadline, or they, you know, wanted additional support like during the school year, because the mentorship is only during the summer. And so I was receptive to that, but I was very cautious because I was working full time in Silicon Valley. And obviously that's like brutal for work-life balance, on top of also running Adroit while I was running, or, you know, working in those full-time jobs. So I already had a lot on my plate, but I was open to the idea of, you know, building this like very, very on the side hustle, that, you know, could then also do some good and help some kids, you know, refine their craft, identify opportunities, put their best foot forward, kind of all of those like stages of emerging writerdom, that I struggled with and eventually figured out, arguably. I was finding, you know, I had a lot of useful input that I could impart on writers. So founded that, but again, you know, it was a super side hustle, and then decided at the end of 2019 that I was going to leave Silicon Valley. I was going to leave tech. And at that point, I saw just a gap, because I knew that I was going to apply to my MFA that cycle. And I did. And so I ended up hearing back in February, March, making a decision, and then COVID happened. But I was already, you know, I had this like 4-month period where I was like, okay, well, I have nothing to do except wait. And so I decided to just build my business. And then COVID happened, and I really had nothing to do except wait. And so I just kept building it and building it. And I found that an online tutoring company was exactly what a lot of creative writers were looking for during COVID, when so many in-person programs were canceled. And so I just went to a bunch of my friends and said, how do you feel about teaching some kids this summer? And there was a lot of interest. And so it just scaled out. You know, there was more interest, there was more demand, there was more interest, there was more demand. And now we're at a point where we're working with, I think there are 131 or 2 students that we are working with for summer workshops this summer. And then we have an additional 40 or so that are working with one-on-one tutors. And so
Oh,
all of that put together, it's a decent community. And now the thing that I'm focusing on is how can I build that community into a better, more year-round, more lasting support system for a lot of these kids who then go back and, they're like the only one in their schools that are interested in creative writing again. And so that's what I'm focused on right now for Ellipsis. But basically the purpose behind Ellipsis is, of course, supporting emerging writers and extending that accessibility beyond people who, happen to come out at the very top of the Adroit mentorship selection pool, because at this
sure.
point, I think they're taking like 5 or 6% of writers, and that's it.
Right.
And the program is huge at this point. It's like 82 or 84 writers, and so I don't know if it can get much bigger. And so that
Sure.
has just been, there's been 95% of the writers that honestly all deserve mentorship of some sort because they're passionate about writing, but the program just doesn't have the ability to scale to meet that. And so that
Right.
was my like predominant motivation to found Ellipsis. And of course, also to find a way to have a full-time job that's more congruent with my work with the journal, so that I can better balance my work with the journal with my full-time job, with my life.
Yes, yes.
Because
Give
it's
you
making
a little
sacrifice.
more flexibility to
Yeah,
plan. Yeah, so that you can,
exactly.
I completely understand,
Yeah,
that.
yep.
So I just want to thank you. This conversation was amazing.
Oh,
And I think that what we talked about will hopefully I think it'll be helpful to a ton of people. And there
I hope
are
so.
Adroit is just up to so many good things. So hopefully this gets spread around. Some additional students get to see some of the programs and some of the specific calls that you have and contests that you have
Yeah,
for
definitely.
students. And then really, like, how do people sign up to get updates from Adroit? What's the easiest way?
Important question. So you can go to any of our guideline pages. So our mentorship page, our regular submission period page, our Janickian Scholars page, our Adroit Prizes page, or I think also our homepage has a little banner, but you can go to any of those pages and just sign up for updates. It's like a form on the website. That's the easiest way. You can also, if you submit to us, you'll be automatically put on our mailing list. As well as if you RSVP for any of our events. We have events, by the way, and they're
Yes.
online, Zoom, readings, panels, all that good stuff. So
Yeah.
that is the best way. But also you can theoretically just email editors at theadroitjournal.org and say, hey, I want to get on your mailing list. How can I do that? Or sign me up. Yeah, so that's how. Theadroitjournal.org. ADROIT.
Perfect. Thank you so much. This has been a great conversation. I so appreciate you taking the time.
Of course.
And
Thank you for asking me.
yeah, no, it's been a real pleasure. So enjoy the rest of your evening.
You too. Take care.